This morning, for your health tip, we are going to revisit the topic of digestion as we continue looking at the function of food. Now, as we know that digestion is the process by which our body breaks down food into its major constituencies, and those constituencies we've been talking about over the last few weeks. Those are proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Now, the digestive process is one that is actually quite orderly, and it is done at different rates. For example, simple carbohydrates, which are sugars, digest relatively quickly, while fats take a bit longer. Proteins and complex carbohydrates, which is your starches, they fall somewhere in between. And that really depends on the fiber content. Now, there are some individuals who say that really you ought to eat only one type of food at one meal and another. For example, only starches at one meal and protein at another. Well, the reality is, if we were to try to get a pure carbohydrate meal, that would probably mean eating just white sugar and maybe the starchy residue that comes after the gluten is removed from white flour. Or if we were to try to get a pure protein meal, that would mean eating egg whites or the dry cottage cheese curds. Or what about a fat? If we were trying to eat a purely fat meal, that would be a few tablespoons of butter or cooking oil. So where do we get our example then? Our example comes from nature. Nature shows us that everything is mixed up. What do I mean? Some time ago we talked about that plant foods contain carbohydrates, fats, and protein. So it's all there. And that is why when we eat a variety, we get all that we need. So how does our body digest these different constituencies? We mentioned this some time ago also. We mentioned that carbohydrates primarily digest in the mouth as it gets mixed with our saliva, and then that process continues in the stomach. Then we have our fats that are digested primarily in our intestines. Our proteins are digested mostly in the stomach, and then it's finished off in the intestines. What happens then is our blood now picks up the small particles, the small substances that have been produced after the food have been broken down, and it picks it up from the intestines and distributes it to our body where it is needed. Only a part of digestion occurs in the stomach. We've mentioned that the rest occurs in the mouth and the intestine, depending on the constituents of the food. The stomach has three basic functions. One, it breaks down food into particles that is a bit of a more uniform size. Two, it breaks the food mass to the needed constituents by adding or absorbing fluid. And number three, it brings the stomach contents to the necessary degree of acidity by secreting acidic digestive juices. Now, these phases accomplish those parts of digestion that require an acid medium. When the stomach contents goes to the intestines, they become alkalinized by the juices that are secreted by the pancreas. The digestive process is completed in the intestine. Now, are there foods that can hamper this digestive process? Yes, they are. Actually, foods that are high in fat are the worst offenders. The body cannot digest fat until it is alkalinized and emulsified by the intestinal juices. A good example would be grease on our hands. Grease on our hands cannot be removed until it is emulsified with soap and hot water. But our body has a protective mechanism that meters the fat from the stomach to the intestines so that the emulsification process isn't overwhelmed. Now, this is why we have to be extremely careful that we don't have too much fat at a meal, because that can severely hamper the body process it. And finally, we need to always have that balance. Our body is able to handle certain amount. If we have too many varieties at a meal, that also hampers our body. And even eating snacks in between meal, that hampers our body's digestive process because our body needs time to relax and to rest. So, as we think about our health tip today, remember, give your body the required time to digest. Your body will thank you. You will be healthier for it. God bless you.